Hi, welcome to Video Games Revisited. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Galaxian on the Atari 2600. Galaxian is a fixed 2D shooter, developed by Namco, and builds heavily upon the formula created by revolutionary games like Space Invaders. The 2600 version is a port of the 1979 arcade classic, and like in Space Invaders, you take on the role of a defender whose sole task is to fight off waves of aliens that are relentlessly attacking him. Instead of the aliens moving in a group and steadily moving towards you, instead they hold back and just move left to right at the top of the screen, so taking them out isn't too easy. And whilst they're keeping their distance, these aliens don't really pose a threat, as they don't fire any shots from this position. However, the aliens will frequently move out of formation and do a kamikaze-style bombing run on you, at which point they close the distance between you rapidly, moving fairly erratically and firing shots. And if the alien survives this bombing run, it rejoins its friends at the top of the screen. Like other games in this genre, you progress by clearing the wave of aliens and then moving on to another wave of more aggressive aliens. The game continues on like this, giving you wave after wave of more difficult aliens to cope with. The difficulty ramps up by increasing the frequency that the enemies will do their bombing runs, and moving them up to pairs of enemies doing bombing runs, and even aliens coming down with escorts, so you have several enemies to worry about at once. Of course, the scoring is adjusted for these harder enemies, and even how you decide to take out these enemies. For example, when an alien is being escorted by a couple of its mates, if you take out the escorts either side before shooting the flagship, you'll get yourself a fairly handsome 800 points. And it's nice to see skill being rewarded in such an early game, as you'd be hard pressed to do something like that accidentally. Galaxian focuses much more heavily upon the aggressive attacking of the enemies rather than hiding behind the shields you're provided with in Space Invaders. Whilst it may seem like a fairly minor point, it does make Galaxian a very different game to Space Invaders, giving it a completely different feel. The game itself is incredibly well polished, and as you get to the higher levels, you'll need a considerable amount of skill to survive, but repeated plays and working on your skill are truly rewarding as you just edge further and further into the game. And I'm sure this is why Galaxian has become considered a classic in its own right, and even the most critical of gamers can't deny that while it does build upon the Space Invaders formula, it really does twist and turn it into something very special, far from being just a clone of another classic arcade game. One of my favourite things about the 2600 port of Galaxian is there's no silly game modes thrown in as a casual distraction that don't really add anything to the gameplay. Instead, the different game modes just increase the difficulty, which gives you a much more focused and rewarding game to play, especially as this port of Galaxian is so close to the arcade one and really doesn't lose any of the feel or excitement that you got when playing the arcade game. You can tell that this port is a port for fans and not simply just a cash-in on the popular arcade cabinet, and it's certainly worth purchasing for anybody who's either a fan of the genre or a fan of this game or classic gaming in general. But that's all there is to see for Galaxian. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.